What up, Z-Pack? It's your boy Z-Dog MD. Check it out. Come on in, come on in, come on in. We're doing Incident Report Mobile Edition. I'm going to start when I get some folks. Bring it. I'm on location touring around the nation, okay? I'm going to show you a view in a second, but you got to come in. 4 people? That's not enough. Logan Stewart. Logan's here. He's running the board virtually. There's no board, and there's no virtually, but there is Logan. How you doing, Logan? I love you, baby. I miss those intros. Tom Heineberg's here. 463 people. I think we can start the show. Okay, check it out. Incident Report Mobile. Vegas doctor, total criminal, reused tools during colonoscopy because he was cheap AF and greedy AF and killed people with hepatitis, infected a bunch more, died in prison a week ago. Is this a good thing? Am I sad? Am I happy? Let's talk about it. But first, guys, I want to tell you where I am. I am at the Lowe's Hotel, Hollywood, California, because I'm doing a talk tomorrow morning for a neurosurgery practice management group. So they're trying to build Health 3.0 in the neurosurgery space. We've talked a lot about it for primary care, but what does it look like for the specialties with bundled payments and all the different changes that are coming to shift us from volume-based care to value-based care? Who cares? Right now, we're talking about crooked Vegas docs. Boom. But first, check out this view. Check this out. Oh, yes. For the people on the podcast who are going to not be able to see this, this is a view of Los Angeles, California from the Lowe's Hotel in the heart of Hollywood. And you can see the beautiful smog. It's actually quite minimal. And looking down here, we got a dope pool with people swimming in it. And it's just April. And some kind of crazy Hollywood thingamajigger. And lots of billboards for stuff like this. I guess this is... Oh, there we go. Ooh, MTV Music Awards. Anyways, back to the lecture at hand. Let me tell you the story about this Las Vegas doc. And I want to preface this by saying what this incident report is really about. It's about talking about taking advantage of a privileged and sacred role in human society, which is the role of the healer. And all of us in healthcare know crooked practitioners in every specialty across the board, not just doctors, but all kinds of people. And so when the healers violate the trust that has been given to them, we need to hold them accountable, not just as a society and as patients, but as fellow caregivers, as fellow practitioners of the healthcare healing arts. And this gentleman in particular, his story is so egregious and yet so strangely typical of my new home of Las Vegas, in the sense that Las Vegas is a place where people go to make their fortunes, to stake their claim, to find their identity, to run from the law, to dabble in legalized prostitution. It's actually not legal in Las Vegas. That is a myth. And as such, it's a cautionary tale for many. So this doctor was a gastroenterologist by the name of Dr. Dipak Desai. And he has been practicing in Las Vegas since around 1980 when he first arrived. And like many immigrant physicians from India, like my parents, he worked very, very hard. Now, the difference between him and my dad, who is an internist and also works very, very hard, is that this guy seemed to care about nothing but money. And we know this for a fact because of what went down. In 2008, he was, I believe it was 2008, it might have been later than that, he was accused and ultimately convicted of running basically a mill, a colonoscopy mill, but that wasn't the problem. People do this all the time. So he was doing high volumes of colonoscopy and billing for like 2-minute colonoscopies that didn't mean anything. So who knows if he was missing cancers and all of the other stuff. But what got him busted is that he was so cheap and ran the operation so... It's taking Toyota Lean to the next level. So efficiently that he was reusing surgical instruments, forceps, not sterilizing things, barely using lube, not changing sheets in between procedures. And what ended up happening was people got infected, multiple people, with hepatitis C. Wow. 2 people died as a result. Many were sickened. And more importantly, there was an installation of fear throughout the community that colonoscopy was dangerous, and this is a life-saving procedure, especially screening colonoscopy, because you're going to catch early cancers and prevent death from colon cancer. So in a way, not only did he injure and kill the people that were under his care, he could potentially injure and kill people that were not, by setting this sort of culture of fear, by being a complete criminal asshole. Let's be completely honest. What he did was simply criminal. I wish I could say it was an isolated thing, but it seems like profiteering, criminal behavior, it goes hand in hand with Health 1.0 and a fee-for-service environment where you're paid to do things to people. So here's a guy who's clearly more of a businessman than a caring healer, who decides, and I'm looking at some of the articles on him. There's actually another article in India West, the Indian paper that we cited the other day, for the other doctor who was accused of female genital mutilation in the other Indian doctor in Michigan. So Dipak Desai apparently died April 10th at Renown Medical Center in Reno, and he was basically, he died of a stroke in prison, and he was actually accused of malingering by authorities because he would pretend he was sick so that he could get out of trial to face the music. But he was basically convicted on a murder charge and some other stuff. And what's interesting about this is, again, it wasn't just, a lot of stuff was reused. I'm going to pull up a Las Vegas Review Journal article here, written by Paul Harasim and dated April 15th. And it's really interesting. So he was known simply, I'm just going to paraphrase some of this article just to fill in some of the blanks, because it is just a horrifying tale, all right? So basically, he arrived in 1980, was known in the medical circle simply as D. And I'll tell you, so Dipak Desai, I will tell you, when I arrived in Vegas in 2012, people would tell me the story of Desai. And some people that I talked to in the medical community still defended him as a brilliant businessman, right? He was so powerful in medical circles in Las Vegas. He was on the board, the medical board of Nevada, the investigative board, the same board that refused to shut his clinic down when the city of Las Vegas shut it down. So talk about disgusting, right? So in the setting of all that, I'm not saying there was, collusion, but it's Vegas, people. When I arrived in Vegas, one of the local medical people actually told me when people like you used to come to town, they wouldn't even find the body. Can you believe this? So anyways, and then in February 2008 at a news conference, it was announced that tens of thousands of patients at his clinic would have to be tested for hepatitis C and HIV. But prior to that, the general public didn't really know about this guy. He was like really well known in medical circles. And so he's like the most famous, polyp screener in the history of medicine, because he's a total criminal. And so since he died last week, this has been back in the news, kind of a retrospective or rectospective in the case of a colonoscopy guy. And, they interviewed some longtime acquaintances with him. So he lived in a $34 million house at Red Rock Country Club in Las Vegas. And I can tell you, this is fancy AF. And golfers could tee off and he could see it. It was an 8,700 square foot house for $34 million. Okay. No physician should make that much money. I'm just going to tell you right now, if you go into medicine, all right, unless you're going into the entrepreneurial side and you're building devices and doing stuff like that or selling out to big pharma, you have no business living in a $34 million house, unless you're saving thousands of lives every day. Like, from a simple value-based proposition, it makes no sense to make that much money. So that's just that's my elephant speaking, all right? And maybe it's because, I want $34 million house, but I don't, because it's hard to maintain. And you need butlers. And butlers make me uncomfortable because of the whole Jeeves thing. Anyways, it's funny. So one of his acquaintances told the news he doesn't even like golf. He thinks it's a waste of time, and I've never seen him play it or watch it. Basically, all he's interested in is making money. He just lives on the golf course for status. And so one of his former patients, Patty Aspinwall, said that this pretty much offers a good insight, because he had bragged to colleagues that he had amassed a $200 million fortune, basically on the backs of abusing the fee-for-service medical system, right? And ultimately killing patients. This is ultimately what he did. Desai's sociopathic greed, former Las Vegas physician Charles Cohen tried unsuccessfully in the 90s to get regulators to take action against him for billing insurance carriers for bogus yet dangerous procedures, didn't just hurt his patients, because ever since it shut down, and then parenthetically, the state medical board where Desai once headed the investigative committee refused to shut it down, The lives of thousands of Southern Nevadans was imperiled because they're afraid to get what can be life-saving colonoscopies, said Dr. Frank Nemec. So this is absolutely terrifying, right? But this absolutely happened. And again, it gets to the heart of like when a sociopath, someone who cares only about self-aggrandizement and money, goes into the healing of allow and encourage this kind of behavior, it's impossible to. Sorry, I'm getting a phone call. I just need to text him and tell him. It's impossible to avoid this kind of fraud. And I think that was one of the biggest problems with Health 1.0 is you have a system that's designed to get people to abuse it, right? So when you build 3.0, you need to be paid based on actual patient outcomes. And that way, if you're going to abuse the system to get the outcomes you want, at least they're getting the outcomes you want, right? So the article goes on to talk about the 13 other doctors who worked for Desai but can still practice in Vegas, right? So they were part of this thing, but they can still practice in Vegas. And it talks about there were 2 nurse anesthetists that worked with him that also got in serious illegal and criminal trouble, and his practice manager, because they were all basically colluding. They were reusing vials of anesthetic. I mean, it was absolutely, technically, legally criminal and factually criminal. Let's read a comment. Liz Mangieri, when a very expensive procedure is covered by everyone's insurance, it's a blank check for the mercenaries to arrive en masse. Yes, and this was the problem with some of the home care industry because it was easy to commit fraud. This is the problem with any procedure-based industry. Cardiac cath. How many cardiac caths did I see in our community hospital in the Bay Area that were done by local mercenary physicians who were cathing GERD? You know, they were in a 20-year-old. There was absolutely no need to do this. And the problem, again, is that the incentives align to make humans behave in a poor way. They probably even rationalized, these cardiologists, that these procedures were necessary when they absolutely was very clear that they weren't. So is Dipak Desai, who just died in prison, right? Do we feel bad for him? Well, he was a sociopath. To the degree that you can feel bad for a sociopath who makes our profession look bad, who injures and kills human beings and is selfish, and anyone who lives in a $34 million home, I'm looking at you, Dr. Oz, as a doctor, I have very little sympathy. I'm not going to say I'm glad he's dead, but I'm going to say I'm not going to cry myself to sleep tonight in my Hollywood hotel because I'm a pimp, son. Anyways, if you guys haven't seen this view, you need to see this right now. In the meantime, what I want to talk about is look at that view though. Oh my gosh, for the podcast people, you're seeing some LA, some Hollywood, and a dope pool. I'm just waiting for the movie stars, you know what I'm saying. All right, back to this. So let's read some comments and then I want to get into the nitty-gritty of this. So what do we got? Easy to commit fraud with Medicare Advantage plans and withholding care or using subpar products while primaries make millions too, Christopher Potts. So Medicare Advantage, so there are lots of different incentive structures in healthcare of how to pay people to take care of people. And when you have a structure that incentivizes you to do less, for example, the HMO capitated structure in the 90s and sometimes currently, then the fraud occurs by doing little for patients and forcing them to go somewhere else and spend the money. And that's just as bad, right? So each of these payment models has its downsides and has its potential fraud. Now, Sandeep Jauhar, he's a doctor in Long Island, Indian guy. It seems like Indian guys are all over the damn place right now. I'm telling you, it's a thing only. Fatafat, everybody's committing the fraud. Not Sandeep. Sandeep's an academic cardiologist in Long Island, and he wrote a book called Doctored, The Disillusionment of the American Physician. And in that book, he effectively, perfectly described the mercenary fee-for-service private practice environment that doctors are in. And he also described how it's dying and how they're struggling and how doing procedures, treadmills, EKGs, stress tests, all of that is a cash mill, say, for cardiologists. And it becomes this volume game just to pay your overhead. And if you're also struggling to try to appear rich, like many doctors try to do, by gussying up their C-Class Mercedes to make it look like an S-Class Mercedes, then it becomes even more problematic. And so what do we need to do? We need to change how we're paid to actually value outcomes. And that's what's going to generate a more Health 3.0 environment where there's teamwork. Now, here's another question, an ethical question that comes up in the setting of Dr. Desai's malfeasance. What was the responsibility of his staff to report what was going on? So I think this is why the anesthesiologist got busted and the clinic manager got busted. People are standing by and watching this horrible behavior, but they don't do anything. Either they're afraid of him because he was very powerful in town. He was one of the big guns in town, and he sat on the committees, and he was, you know what I mean? Or they felt like it wasn't their role, or they were just part of the crime. And you know, it's just like any complicity in crime. We see it happen. You know, there's many reasons for it. The question is, what's our responsibility as healthcare practitioners? I would say our responsibility is to stand up and try to blow the whistle on this kind of behavior, because it is a violation of everything that we're trying to do, right? Which is help patients. And it's a violation of, honestly, the guild of trust that we develop between healthcare practitioners and patients. Even though there's been struggle recently in recent years, we doctors, nurses are still ranked traditionally as some of the most trusted individuals in society. So this kind of thing hurts everybody, right? And again, I think it has to do largely with incentive structures that encourage us to do things to people, to run volume mills. This is true in Health 1.0 in a fee-for-service world. It's true in Health 2.0 in a capitated, click the boxes, high volume, do as little as possible and churn the patients through in a cookbook way. I think it's just as bad, right? So we need something that transcends all of that. Let's scroll and look at some comments. If staff can't blow the whistle, then staff needs to resign and remove self from the scene, Denellen Sutherland. So it's tricky, Denellen, because are you going to work in another place in town? They're going to ask why you left. So I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm saying there are reasons, that there are barriers to this whistleblowing behavior. We need to remove those barriers somehow, right? Timber Leaves says, yes, staff is just as guilty. I cannot argue. I think there's a complicity, and I think they have been held legally liable for some of this, as were the insurance companies and some of the hospitals. I think they got in trouble and had to spend some money. Thank heavens I'm a union nurse. I would report to the Department of Health in a heartbeat. Michelle McLaughlin, right? Now, remember, Vegas is a bit of the Wild West, so I think he was able to get away with it for a while because it's really a different environment. It's kind of like a 1.0 meets Wild West with the early vestiges of 2.0 coming in. What do we got? Danya says she would speak up. This doctor Audrey Maminta. This doctor drives a Honda, struggles to pay student loans. Audrey, represent, man. I tell you, the struggle is real, and actually it took me a long time between paying off loans, trying to buy like even an entry-level house in a real expensive part of California, and having kids and all that. It took us a long time to get financially stable after I turned 30 and started practicing as a full-time attending. So people always look at docs and go, you guys are rich and you have first world problems. This may all be true, but we defer getting paid for a long, long, long time. And then when we do, it's probably really easy for some people to fall into the trap of abuse and the volume-based practice. And a lot of the practice, honestly, in Las Vegas is this very high volume, low quality practice. And this is what I've noticed, and I'm just giving you the straight dibs on it. Like I know a radiologist who who graduated Stanford, went to a big group in Las Vegas and left after a year, made basically $1 million and left after a year because someone's trying to break into my room. Left after a year because he felt he didn't even have time to look at bones anymore. It was just volume. Felt like he was going to kill someone and left. And some people do better in those volume environments and some don't. People who really, like my wife, she doesn't thrive in that environment, so she will not take a radiology job in Las Vegas. She does a little bit of teleradiology just to stay connected and then goes back to Stanford and volunteers to do academic shifts. So, oh, hang on. Let's look at this. Someone's knocking on the door. Let's take a look. Hi, how are you? Oh, wow, thank you. You may. Do you mind? I'm doing a Facebook.
Okay, don't worry about it.
Do you mind being on it? Do you want to say hi to people?
Hi.
Hey.
Hi.
Thank you for this. Let me.
Desk is okay, or
The desk is perfectly fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Let me put this here. Hey, Z-Pack. It looks like the people having me speak are really
Everything
nice.
okay in your room? Everything
It's
fine?
beautiful.
All
Thank
right,
you
nice.
for everything.
Okay, absolutely. Do you like me to open one of your Coke for you?
Oh, that's okay. I think I'll save them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, absolutely.
Whoa, jelly beans. Thank you.
Yes.
Hey, I really appreciate it.
All right, sure,
Yeah.
absolutely. Anything else I can do for you?
No, I'm great.
Okay.
Thanks.
My pleasure. Enjoy.
Take
Have
care.
a nice
Yeah.
evening. Thank
You
you.
too.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Look at that, guys. You got to see what I got here. Hold on. Here we go. All right. It looks like I got M&Ms, gummy bears, jelly beans, popcorn, and more popcorn, and 2 Cokes. Now, let's talk CPAC. We need to talk about this meal here. So the people who are having me speak tomorrow, the neurosurgery practice management group, this was a very kind gesture. However, if they knew me well, which obviously they don't because you can't, because only I know me well, I don't drink sugar or eat sugar, and my kids aren't here to eat this. So I'm really sad because it looks so good. So what I'm going to do, Devin Moore, my audio engineer, is coming over later. We're going to have a meal, and I'm going to feed him and his partner all this. So there's 2 Cokes, one for him, one for her, all this and this. So it's dope. By the way, what did you think of, his name was Pablo, the gentleman who delivered the goods. I thought he was really sweet. And by the way, always, always, always tip people in hotels because they work really, really hard. And any sort of gesture you can do, you got to understand, like housekeepers, a lot of times we forget to tip them. And even a few dollars goes a long way when you're struggling in a entry-level job like that. So that's my one piece of if you can afford to tip people, tip people. And the great thing about Dipak Desai, the doctor who died in prison after killing people with hepatitis by being cheap and running a volume mill, is he was so notoriously cheap that he would put people's lives in danger to make a few extra bucks. That's not a way to live a life. Money is not the gateway to happiness, people. Connections, purpose, meaning, those are the gateways. Money can give you freedom to achieve that stuff and to make sure your physical and mental needs are met. But once you reach that threshold, and actually in the US, it's been pegged at, the sort of preliminary data says after around $70,000 a year, which is still a lot of money, any more money after that is a rapidly diminishing return. So $34 million house is too damn much. Let's read some comments. We were talking about driving Hondas. Where are we now? Let's scroll down to the bottom. Where are you now transmitting to summarize, Radomir? I am at the Lowe's Hollywood Hotel. I'm going to read some comments while I show you the view. I'm at the Lowe's Hollywood Hotel. I'm giving a talk tomorrow morning. What do we got? Pablo is cool and was not camera shy. That's true, Sylvia Salazar. He was pretty cool. Who eats that crap? Elizabeth Chickentelli. Well, my kids, unfortunately, when I let them. Trevor Westerman, what is your opinion of cash-only practices and how do you see them integrating into the future of medicine? So, Trevor, this is a great question. Increasingly, what we're seeing in a hostile insurance environment are the development of cash-only practices where patients pay cash to have a procedure done and they get a guaranteed outcome. So if it's a surgical procedure, they pay X, and if there are complications, the doctors take care of it within X. It's like a bundled payment, and it's off the insurance grid, which means that doctors have autonomy to practice and document how they see fit. They don't have to worry about clicking boxes. They have to worry about outcomes for the patient and making sure the patient does well. And in those settings, it can be a pretty powerful way to do things. The problem is it's hard for patients to afford when they're doing that on top of insurance. And the question is, can it lead to abuse like a fee-for-service abuse? Well, I think the difference here is when patients are paying out of pocket, they more often will behave in a consumer-like way. So unless it's providing value for them and some degree of outcome that they value, they're not going to do it. So it's not like colonoscopy where the insurance was covering it and he was just milling through, whether it was needed or not, whether he did a good job or not, it didn't matter, right? Let's read some more comments. So I'm not against cash-only practices as part of the overall spectrum of care. Carrie Hinchliff, Jamie Waldrop, maybe that's that much sugar overload that Zed will develop a whole new other type of diabetes. I'm hoping to develop diabetes type 3. Doesn't exist yet, but I'm going to forge that path. If I eat this, I will die instantly, actually. Liz Mangieri, multi-billionaire King Hussein of Jordan, who is by all accounts a good guy, couldn't buy his way out of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, but they built a cancer center named for him in Jordan. Yes, I remember that, Liz. Money will not save you from death, and you cannot take it with you. So make those connections. Have a meaning and purpose in your life. All signs point to that being the source of happiness. You can have the poorest person in India, and they've studied this, and they could be the happiest person in the world because they have connections, they have society, they have social connections, family connections, friends, community around them, and they're living with a sense of purpose, whether it's spiritual purpose or a purpose in their daily life, a purpose raising their children. It doesn't matter. That's what separates the unhappy from the happy. And in America, in particular, we chase the almighty dollar, material acquisitions, cars, all of this, to the exclusion of the connections, and we're so busy looking at our phones that we're not talking to people anymore. And I think this is one of the fundamental things that is hurting us, and that ties it all back in to Dipak Desai, criminal doctor, now dead in prison. What can we learn from him? We learn that if we see something happening like this, we should report it as healthcare people, as part of the tribe of healthcare, as people who care about building Health 3.0. We learn that money does not buy happiness, nor does it save you from death in prison. And in the end, it's a very sad story for his patients, for his family, and ultimately for himself, because through his sociopathic behavior and greedy behavior, he ruined what could have been a meaningful life. And on that note, my friends, I'm going to go and get ready for a bunch of stuff. I want you guys to enjoy your night. I'm going to put this up on a podcast. Remember to go rate and subscribe to our podcast and do all those things. I'll try to look at some comments later if I get a second. And I am out. Peace.